Rock on. Right. In this one, we're going to start with kind of a little bit of a crash course in adding skeletons to a character. Obviously, this one's kind of a humanoid character. A very quick representation of the artist dummy that I have sitting on my desk because it was convenient and I had something to look at the time. So, not the best model, but it'll work. Now, if you notice, he's made up of a whole bunch of different parts. Basically, every joint is a different piece. That doesn't really make that big of a difference right here. It does make my outliner a bit of a mess, but whatever. So again, I'm going to go shading, go to X-ray, and typically when I do these, I like to start around the hip area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my joint tool, which is on the animation shelf, is where I use it from, or you can go to the animation menu, set, up to skeleton, down to joint tool. I'm going to place one about at his hip. Okay. I'm going to place one, well, I guess that's kind of his abdomen. That's where I'll have him. We'll start at the hip. How about that? That'll make things a lot easier. When I place the knee, I want the knee actually to be slightly in front of the hips, and then the ankle slightly behind. So I have just a very little bend here. Like I said in the last video, that's for when we start adding IK chains, which are very similar kind of to ligaments. But anyway, you can also click and drag if you hold down the mouse button just to get this positioned exactly where you want it. I know there's not a joint outside of the foot, but you should place the joint just outside of it anyway. That way when you bind the skin, the front of the foot will come with it. I'm going to hit enter to confirm that chain. Now I'm going to do a little something strange. I'm going to grab the joint tool, and if you click on an existing joint with the joint tool, it will highlight that part in the hierarchy, and then when you draw another joint, it will draw out from the joint you started on. And I know that he wouldn't actually have a joint out here, but having this bone in the back end of his heel is extremely, extremely helpful when you're doing, just to get him to move around. It will keep his feet more in shape, keep him in the right shape. This is useful even on human characters where there's not a pronounced heel jutting out of the back of his foot. So keep that in mind. Again, I'm going to hit enter to confirm the chain. Let's see here, and I'm going to actually go into my perspective view. I'm going to grab this joint, hit the move tool, jump into the front view, and kind of get that centered in the leg a little bit. Since his legs aren't entirely straight, I'll probably just tweak them a little bit. But since I'm doing it in this view, I know that it's right. Or I know that they're going to be in the right place. I'm not moving them, way behind the character or whatever. Now I'll go into my front view and grab this whole joint chain, Control D to duplicate, because I want his legs to be pretty much the same. Get that centered. Get this centered. If you have trouble selecting the joints and you keep getting like your character, you can go up at the top here. There's this little button that says select surface objects. Turn that off. That way I can't select my character at all. That way I only get the bones. Again, just going to fix that a little bit. Move that down just a bit. Okay. Now I shall draw the hips, or the abdomen, or whatever you want to call it. Again, I'm going to put on my move tool. This is going to sit in place of like the spine. So I'm going to push that towards the back of his body. Still centered, but in the back. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. There's the connect joint tool. Since I have his hip selected, I'm going to go ahead and take my connect joint tool, and I'm going to select this joint, or the hip, or the whatever's the base of his spine, and then his hip. And then I'm going to click on the connect joint tool. I get a little ahead of myself sometimes. So we're going to go to the outliner. I'm going to select this joint just so I can easily find it here. Okay, so I know that's joint 7. This one is going to be joint 1. Okay, so you can see that the joints already come in a hierarchy. I've got joint 1, joint 2, which is the knee, joint 3, which is the ankle, and 4 and 5, which come off of the ankle. So I want you to watch this lovely, lovely little trick. Joint 7, I want them connected to. So if I just middle click and drag on joint 1, which I know is his entire left leg, and drag it down to joint 7, it automatically connects it for me. So that's an easy way of reparenting your hierarchy. So I just did the same thing with the other joint chain. If I were actually doing this model, I would name all these joints so that I know what it is that's going on in this mess that I've created, but in the interest of saving time, I just threw it all out there and hope that it doesn't cause me any problems later. Okay, so now I'm going to go back into my side view. I'm going to select this joint that is now the base of his spine, and we're just going to do a couple more joints up his back. Okay. Keep in mind, the more joints, the more bendy he's going to be. For this example, I'm going to use a couple. Oops, seems like I didn't quite make it to connect them. So, again, I'm going to go to my outliner. Easy way to fix it. Take this joint chain, parent it to this joint chain. Now everything's coming off his hips. I'm going to grab the joint tool, and there's really no good way to explain this, but I'm going to click that hip joint, and I'm going to drag out just in front of him. I'm going to hit enter to confirm it. Grab the joint tool. I'm actually going to do this for every joint in his spine there. This just makes it so when he bends forward, his stomach won't cave in on itself, since he's got his spine set towards the back. So, actually I'm going to do it for every joint except this one where the nape of his neck is. Okay, now just for this tutorial, to keep it kind of short, I'm not going to do the arms, so we're going to bind it all, and we're going to have some problems with the feet because they're very close together, and I want to show you that, but the arms and the head are not going to be connected. So what I'm going to do is select my skeleton, and then I'm going to turn select surface objects back on just because I don't like leaving it off. I'm going to go in the outliner, and I'm going to just select all of this, and then I'm going to close that, go to skin, bind skin, and I'm going to do a smooth bind. Okay, so this may cause a few problems in the arms too. I'm not quite sure, just because I bound them to a skeleton that has no bones out there. But now you can see if I grab this hip joint, put on my rotate tool, I get a little deformation in the foot here because the feet were so close together and I didn't adjust my settings. So, you know, you're going to want to play around with those. And you can see that even though I've got a smooth bind on, I get some deformation in the hips too. Some of that's unavoidable. Some of it can be fixed by using smaller joints, binding the skin. Basically, fixing this foot problem will fix some of this too. But you can see, for the most part, I've got a character that I can bend. He's got a very cartoony effect just because he sort of deforms. I'm going to turn off X-ray so I can't really see. This is where that lesson on controls comes in handy. You can make knee controls and foot controls and stuff like that, and we may get into that later. But in the interest of time, no, not today. Again, now you can see that he can do a huge back bend that wooden artist dummies don't do, but would be great for the great for the movie that I've just decided I'm going to make with this guy, where he's going to grab off his supplies off a desk and become a wooden Rambo. Maybe, if I ever get to that. But you see, I get a little deformation in this hip part too, but you wouldn't be able to see that since he's inside of the character. So that's the basics of sort of binding skin to a character. Then we'll start getting into IK chains and a little bit more into it eventually.